existence. And so they designated different water sources for themselves and their livestock, treating the springs that fed them as if they were too sacred for human touch. Can you imagine the level of delusion? They were dying of thirst in some seasons, yet water flowed freely for trees they had. Only the beginning of their descent into madness. Every single month, without fail, each village would hold its celebration. They called them festivals, days of worship, moments of communion with their so-called gods. But what actually happened during these gatherings? It was nothing short of pure, unadulterated demonic ritual disguised as religion. The people would gather around their village's sacred pine tree, bringing with them cattle, sheep, anything they could slaughter. They'd kill these animals right there at the base of the tree, letting the blood soak into the soil, believing this pleased their wooden deity. Then came the fire. Massive pyres of wood stacked high, set ablaze until the flames roared and the smoke billowed upward in thick, black clouds. They'd throw the
Newsletter sign-up forms are a common feature on web applications today. They allow users to submit their email address and receive
upward in thick, black clouds. They'd throw the sacrificed meat into these fires, watching as the smoke rose higher and higher until it completely obscured the tree from view. The sky would darken. The air would become thick and suffocating. And that's when they would drop to their faces in prostration, crying, begging, pleading with the tree to accept their offerings. Be pleased with us, forgive us, grant us your blessings. Grown men and women weeping before bark and branches, completely convinced that this plant held their fate in its roots. But here's what makes this truly horrifying. Their prayers were answered. Not by the tree, of course, but by something far more sinister. As they lay there in prostration, faces pressed into the dirt, sobbing and calling out, the tree would begin to move. Its branches would shake and sway despite there being no wind. And then, from within the trunk itself, a voice would emerge. Not a human voice, something that sounded like a child, high-pitched and eerie, echoing through the smoke-filled air. I am pleased with you, my servants. Be at ease. Rejoice, for I accept your worship. It was Shaitan himself, Iblis, the accursed, walking among them and deceiving them. It was not the tree, and it held no power. This was pure deception from Shaitan, who can do nothing except by Allah's permission. And they believed it, every single word. The moment they heard that voice, chaos would erupt, but the joyful kind. They'd leap to their feet, screaming in ecstasy, embracing one another, dancing wildly around the tree. The wine would flow freely. The music would start, drums, flutes, singing that echoed through the valleys. Men and women drinking until they could barely stand, celebrating what they thought was divine approval. This wasn't worship. This was a drunken party masquerading as spirituality, and it would continue all day and all night, every single month, in every single village.
More wine! Bring us more wine!
12 months, 12 villages, 12 festivals of deception. But once a year, something even bigger happened. The grand celebration at the original tree, the mother pine in the greatest village. This was their ultimate pilgrimage. Every man, woman, and child from all 12 villages would make the journey. They'd construct an enormous pavilion around the tree, a tent made of the finest silk with 12 entrances, one for each village. The sacrifices here weren't just a few animals, they brought hundreds. The fires were larger, the smoke thicker, the rituals more intense. And when Iblis came to this tree, his voice was louder, stronger, more convincing. He'd make promises, he'd give them hope. He'd tell them exactly what they wanted to hear, binding them deeper into his web of lies. For 12 straight days and nights, they'd remain in this state of intoxication, both literal and spiritual. Drinking, dancing, singing, completely surrendered to the devil himself while believing they were worshipping God. They had no idea they were bowing to their own destruction. Allah, in his infinite mercy, does not destroy a people without first sending them a warning, without giving them a chance, without offering them a way out of the darkness they've trapped themselves in. And so, despite their depravity, despite their complete submission to Shaitan, he sent them a messenger, a prophet from among the children of Israel, from the lineage of Judah, son of Yaqub alayhi salam. A man chosen by Allah to pull these people back from the brink of destruction. Imagine the weight on his shoulders, being sent to a civilization so deeply entrenched in falsehood that they couldn't tell the difference between divine guidance and demonic whispers. He arrived in their land and began his mission with patience, with compassion, with the kind of persistence that only comes from genuine faith in Allah's command. Day after day, month after month, year after year, he walked through their villages, calling them to the truth. Worship Allah alone. He is your creator, your sustainer, the one who gave you these rivers, these fields, this life you enjoy. These trees you bow to, they can't hear you, they can't help you, they can't even protect themselves. But how did they respond? With mockery, with laughter, with the same arrogance that has plagued every disbelieving nation since the beginning of time. You want us to abandon what our fathers and forefathers worshipped. You want us to throw away centuries of tradition for your words. Who are you to tell us how to live? They'd surround him in the marketplace, pointing and jeering. Some would throw stones, others would spit at his feet. The Prophet never stopped. He kept calling, kept warning, kept reminding them that Allah's punishment would come if they didn't turn back. Whether you listen or you ignore me, he told them, my duty is only to convey the message clearly. I am not responsible for what you choose to do with it. But his words fell on deaf ears. Worse, they fell on hardened hearts that had been sealed by years of demonic influence. Then came the day that changed everything, the grand annual festival. The Prophet decided to attend, perhaps hoping that seeing them all gathered in one place would give him one final opportunity to reach them. He walked into that pavilion and witnessed the full horror of their worship, the hundreds of slaughtered animals, the roaring fires, the thick smoke that blotted out the sun, the people prostrating, weeping, begging a tree for mercy. And then the voice, Shaitan's voice, praising them, encouraging them, promising them blessings. And the explosion of celebration that followed, the wine, the dancing, the music, the complete and utter abandonment of reason and morality. The Prophet stood there, watching as thousands of people fell deeper into their delusion. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that not a single one of them would believe. The darkness had consumed them entirely. Their disbelief wasn't just in their minds, it had poisoned their very souls. Each year they returned to this festival. They became more lost, more attached to their lies, more distant from any possibility of redemption. His heart broke, but his resolve strengthened. If they wouldn't listen to warnings, then perhaps they'd understand the language of consequences. The Prophet had reached his limit. He'd given them years of patience, of gentle warnings, of clear signs. He'd attended their festivals, witnessed their depravity, and still held out hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would wake up. But that hope was gone now. The disbelief had rooted itself so deeply in their hearts that there was no pulling it out. So he raised his hands to the sky and made a prayer that would seal their fate forever. O Lord, your servants have refused everything except denial. They've turned their backs on you and chosen to worship a tree that can neither harm nor benefit them. O Allah, show them your power. Dry up their trees, all of them. Let them see that what they've been worshipping is powerless, lifeless, nothing. That night, The people of Al-Ras went to sleep as they always did, content, secure in their delusion, confident that their gods would continue to bless them. But when the sun rose the next morning, something was terribly wrong. Every single tree, in every single village, completely withered. The vibrant green pines that had stood tall for generations were now gray, brittle, lifeless. The branches that once swayed majestically hung limp and dead. The leaves that rustled in the wind had crumbled to dust. Even the great mother tree, the original pine planted by Yafith alayhi salam, the one they considered the most sacred of all, stood skeletal and hollow, as if death itself had wrapped around its trunk overnight. Panic erupted. People poured into the streets, screaming, crying, running to their trees to see if it was real, and it was. The gods they had sacrificed for, the gods they had wept before, the gods that had spoken to them through Shaitan's voice, they were dead, silent, powerless. But instead of recognizing this as a sign from Allah, instead of falling to their knees and repenting, they did what disbelievers always do. They blamed everyone except themselves. The people split into two camps, both equally foolish. One group pointed their fingers at the Prophet. This is his doing. He's a sorcerer. He cursed our gods because we wouldn't follow him. His magic killed our trees. They worked themselves into a frenzy, convincing each other that a single man had somehow destroyed something they believed was divine. The other group took a different approach, but just as deluded. No, our gods are angry with us. They're punishing us because we allowed this man to insult them. We let him speak against them, and now they've withdrawn their beauty and hidden their light from us. We must make this right. And that's when both groups reached the same horrifying conclusion. Whether they believed he cursed the trees or angered the gods, the solution was the same. He had to die. Not just die, he had to be sacrificed, offered up to appease the very demons they'd been worshipping all along. If we kill the one who insulted our gods, if we bury him beneath the great tree as an offering, then surely they'll forgive us. Surely the trees will bloom again. Surely everything will return to normal. They gathered their tools. They made their plans. And the Prophet, who had only ever wanted to save them, was about to face the most brutal execution imaginable. Because mercy, that was something they'd forgotten long ago. What happened next is so disturbing, so cruel, that it stands as one of the most horrific acts of violence ever committed against a messenger of God. They began with the spring, the sacred spring at the base of the great mother tree, the one they had refused to drink from for generations because they believed it was the lifeblood of their God. They brought long pipes and channels, working day and night to drain every last drop. The water that had flowed for centuries was now being redirected, emptied, removed completely. Was now being redirected, emptied, removed completely. And when the spring finally ran dry, when the earth at its base was exposed and cracked, they grabbed their shovels and began to dig. Not a grave. Graves are for the dead, and they wanted him to feel every second of what was coming. They dug a well, deep into the earth, right beneath the withered tree they still somehow believed was divine. But this wasn't a normal well. It was narrow, suffocatingly narrow. Just wide enough for a man's body to fit through, but too tight to move, too tight to turn, too tight to do anything except exist in absolute agony. Down, down, down they dug, into the darkness, creating a vertical prison that no human being should ever experience. And then they brought him. The Prophet who had spent years calling them to truth, who had shown them nothing but patience and sincerity, was now being dragged toward his living tomb. They lowered him down slowly, deliberately, into that impossibly tight shaft, his body scraping against the walls, the darkness swallowing him whole, the air growing thinner with every foot of descent. until finally he reached the bottom, cramped and broken, barely able to breathe. But they weren't done. They rolled a massive stone over the opening. Not to give him a quick death, no, they wanted him trapped, sealed, buried alive beneath the earth with just enough air to keep him conscious, to keep him suffering. This was their sacrifice to Shaitan. This was how they believed they'd restore their God's favor, by offering up the life of a righteous man in the most excruciating way imaginable. And as they sealed that stone, they could hear him, his voice muffled and distant, rising from the depths of that hellish pit. My Lord, you see how confined my space is. You see the severity of my distress. Have mercy on the weakness of my strength. Have mercy on my helplessness. Hasten the taking of my soul. Do not delay the answer to my prayer. He wasn't begging them for mercy. He knew they had none. He was calling out to Allah, the only one who could hear him now, the only one who had ever truly heard him. His voice cracked with exhaustion, with pain, with the weight of knowing that these people, the very people he was sent to save, were celebrating above him. Because that's exactly what they were doing. As his muffled prayers echoed beneath them, they danced, they sang. They drank their wine and played their music, convinced they'd done something righteous. Now our gods will be pleased. Now the trees will return. Look how we've avenged them. His cries continued until his strength gave out, until his breath grew shallow, until finally, mercifully, his soul was taken, and the only sound left in that pit was silence. You need to understand something absolutely chilling about what happened next. This wasn't a moment of silence. This wasn't a somber execution where people bowed their heads and walked away. No, what took place above that sealed well was a full-blown celebration, a party, a festival of evil that would make your blood run cold. The moment they rolled that stone over the opening, trapping the prophet in his living grave, they erupted in cheers. Actual cheers. Like they'd just won some great victory. They embraced each other, congratulating themselves on what they believed was an act of devotion. We've done it. We've avenged our gods. We've given them the ultimate sacrifice. The man who dared insult them is now buried beneath the tree he mocked. And then the music started. Drums pounding, flutes playing, voices rising in song. They formed circles around the dead tree and began to dance, spinning, clapping, lost in euphoria. The wine came out almost immediately, passed from hand to hand, poured generously, as if they were toasting to their own righteousness. They laughed. They sang songs of praise to their wooden deities. They convinced themselves that this act of murdering an innocent prophet was the most holy thing they could have possibly done. But here's what makes this absolutely unbearable. As they danced and sang and drank, they could hear him, his voice rising from beneath the earth, faint but unmistakable. Muffled cries that should have shattered their hearts, should have made them stop and realize the horror of what they'd done. My Lord, you see my anguish. You see how tight this space is. Have mercy on my weakness. My anguish. You see how tight this space is. Have mercy on my weakness. They heard him, every word, and they didn't stop. They didn't pause. If anything, they celebrated harder, as if drowning out his prayers with their noise would somehow make them less guilty. Some even mocked him, shouting down toward the stone, "Cry all you want. Your God can't save you now. Our gods have won." Can you imagine that level of cruelty, that level of spiritual blindness? A man, a messenger sent by the creator of the universe, is dying a slow, agonizing death beneath their feet, and they're dancing on top of his grave like it's the greatest day of their lives. Now, the trees will bloom again, they told each other, passing around more wine. Now our gods will restore their beauty. We've shown them our loyalty. We've proven our devotion. They genuinely believed that in a few days, maybe a week, those withered pines would turn green again. that the branches would fill with life, that everything would return to the way it was. All day they celebrated, all night they sang. The hours dragged on, and beneath them the prophet's voice grew weaker. His prayers became slower, more labored, as his body gave out in that suffocating darkness. Hasten, the taking of my soul. Do not delay. The answer to my prayer. He wasn't asking